A lot of people feel like that is in some ways a more dignified thing for a person basically to be in a box in the ground. There's no law on the books anywhere that says it's required. Green burial is what all burial was up until 100 to 150 years ago. Sadly, there are a lot of people who do not realize that it is legal in all 50 states, but we have a long way to go to make sure everyone has access to this.
How would you describe a green burial versus a cremation or even just a regular burial? Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And we're back with another episode of Digital Legacy Podcast, exploring death and dying in the digital age. And today I'm here with Carin. Carin and I met, back in late 2023, where she works at Noggle Funeral Home. And at Noggle Funeral Home here in Pennsylvania region, they do community events, educational events within the funeral industry. And Carin, you and Susan had offered a green burial session. So please introduce yourself and talk to us more about green
It's
burials.
great to see you, Nikki. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about this. Just by way of introducing myself, my name is Carin Bonifacino. I work at Noggle and Grieco Funeral Home, which are both owned by Matthew Grieco. Noggle is in Quakertown. Grieco is in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And I wear a lot of hats and do a lot of work at the funeral homes. I'm a funeral celebrant. I do a lot of outreach and education. That was one of the workshops that you attended. Susan Grieco and I have created a whole series of monthly events that we call Death Conversations. So at Noggle Funeral Home, it's called Death Conversations Quakertown. And at Grieco Funeral Home, it's called Death Conversations Kennett Square. Outside of my work at the funeral homes, I also am the co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Friends of Green Burial PA for Pennsylvania. And my teammates and I started the nonprofit basically to educate the public about green or natural burial. I tend to use those two words interchangeably. They mean the same thing. Because as natural burial becomes more widespread and more available, sadly, there are a lot of people who do not realize that it is legal in all 50 states. It is available, and it's a third option. In Pennsylvania, we don't have aquamation or human composting, but we do have green burial. The education work that we were doing that night at Noggle Funeral Home was to get the information out to the people who might be interested. And so I do that work both in my day job at the funeral homes and in my extracurricular time on evenings and weekends. I'm out giving presentations at libraries and conferences and things like that.
So for someone who doesn't know what a green burial is, how would you describe a green burial versus a cremation or even just a regular burial?
So the first thing that I like to say to people is green burial is what all burial was up until 100 to 150 years ago. It is an unembalmed body going directly into the soil without a concrete vault or liner, and in a biodegradable casket or shroud. The cemeteries themselves are the ones that require things like concrete vaults. And so cemeteries themselves can also not require concrete vaults.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because having buried both my parents, And then recently, my uncle, and that was responsible for his
Yeah.
arrangements. It was a bit of
Yes.
jarring, the cost of a vault and the
Yes.
fact that it was required by the cemetery. So, a vault versus a direct burial. What is the reason that they want us to use a vault? And then what are
Yeah.
our options not to?
So the reasons that they use the vault are really really interesting. It is so that the grave does not sink. As a wooden casket and a body decompose over time, um, that is going to break down, and the soil is going to sink over time. A concrete vault prevents the sinking of the ground. So it very much has to do with the maintenance of the cemetery. Number one, so that their staff doesn't have to go back and add soil where the ground sinks. And it has to do with lawnmowers and equipment that's used to maintain those cemeteries so that they are not going over bumpy ground where it has sunk. So that is how they came to be. And of course, a lot of people feel like that is in some ways a more dignified thing for a person basically to be in a box in the ground. When I say that the cemeteries require them and they can also not require them, it's because the requirement of the vault has to do with their own rules and regulations. There's no law on the books anywhere that says it's required. So I'll speak to Pennsylvania because that's the state that I'm most familiar with. Right now, we have 17 cemeteries in the state where you can be buried without the concrete vault and you can just go right into the soil in your pine box or your wicker casket. 16 of those 17 cemeteries are already existing cemeteries that have headstones and vaults and all the things. And they have set aside a section where they do not require them. One of the 17 cemeteries is a 100% natural burial ground. It's more of that nature preserve kind of concept. An existing cemetery to implement it, it is as simple as them saying, over here, we require the vaults, and over here, we do not require them.
It's
So
really just a designation of where the land is going to be, the use purpose of each of
that
land.
that is that is correct. And I like to say that the very forward-thinking cemeteries are the ones that are making these changes, that see that off giving people options benefits them, benefits the cemetery. But it's not always the easiest sell trying to
Well,
convince them.
when you and I first started talking, I asked specifically, so is it green burial an industry? And you corrected me and said it was a movement. So share more about what this movement is like. If we started, it kind of feel like breastfeeding, right? It's like this was the most natural thing, and then
Right.
we kind of took a detour over the last
Yes.
century or so, and now
Yeah.
we're finding our way back to. So,
Yeah.
when did the new modern movement of green burial, or you're calling it also natural burial? That's
Correct. 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 Yeah, so, as I said, this is the original practice of burial that we are just trying to return to, um, make more available. The modern green burial movement started in the US in the late 90s. The very first new natural burial grounds opened in South Carolina in the late 90s. Over the last, say, 25-ish, 27, 28 years, I think between the US and Canada now, we have around 400 cemeteries that allow this practice. But when you consider that we have 50 US states and the United States and Canada are vast territories, it's a wonderful start. But we have a long way to go to make sure everyone has access to this. If you have to drive 3, 4, 5 hours to get to the nearest green burial ground or cemetery, that's not really making it very accessible for people. So I think I use the word movement because there are still so many of us. I mean, I am one of hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the US who are actively working to try to convince existing cemeteries to allow people to do this, or people who are looking for land to create new cemeteries. It's still very much a boots on the ground, grassroots kind of thing. So I can only hope that someday it will be an industry. But right now, it's still very much a grassroots, community by community, people working to create these where they live.
So if I was to come into and say I have a loved one that just passed,
Yeah,
and or I did my pre-planning and
yeah,
came in and discussed, like, okay, I have three options. I
yeah,
have a traditional burial where you said there's a coffin and then a vault,
right,
and then I have a nice green pasture to be mowed over,
right,
or
right.
cremation, or this green burial. And I chose a green burial. What
Yeah.
would that conversation be like in that pre-planning stage with your team?
Yeah, on the pre-planning side, it would involve, first and foremost, finding out if the family has decided which cemetery they want to be buried in. So, with luck, there's a cemetery not too far away. They've maybe bought their plots already and have those deeds or those pieces of paper. Um, in terms of the funeral home involvement, we would explain to the family that at the time of death, someone would call the funeral home, let us know that the person has died. We would come and pick up the deceased person, bring them back to our funeral home, and keep their body in refrigeration. Because you're not doing embalming in a natural burial, then the way we preserve the body is just by keeping it cold. So we can keep the body, you can keep a body in refrigeration for a very, very long time. For most natural burials, it might be in refrigeration anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. Most natural burials happen somewhere in that window of 3 days to 3 weeks. While the body is being kept cold, the funeral home is assisting with arrangements to find out from the family when they would like to do the burial. Maybe they want to still have a church service or a memorial service. That could happen before the burial, that could happen after the burial. All those types of ceremony or gathering are still applicable, 100% um, recommended that there is still some type of memorial or gathering. And then when the day of the burial comes, the funeral home would transport again, either the pine box or the wicker casket or the shrouded body to the cemetery. And then the burial would take place. And again, maybe we first went to the church and then to the cemetery,
With the
or maybe,
body?
pardon?
So you would bring the body to a church, even
We
knowing it wasn't embalmed?
That is correct. That is correct. Most churches would, rather that in those cases that that the body is in something like a pine box or a wicker casket. And it is okay to have an unembalmed body in a closed casket. We recently had a family that the mother wanted to be shrouded for her green burial. The church would not allow us to bring the shrouded body into the church. They said, no problem, but we don't want a shrouded body. So we had to scramble at the last minute and get a wicker casket that was absolutely beautiful. So she was in a closed casket, but a wicker casket. And we had the church service at the Catholic Church and then went to the cemetery and did the burial afterwards. So, yeah.
When you mention shrouds, I think of, I'm just thinking of some of the traditional burials around the world, right? Because I
Sure. Oh,
really,
sure.
and I'm thinking how they literally, I mean, it's the body wrapped in a shroud, in a
Right.
cloth of some
In
sacred
cloth.
cloth, and
Yeah.
people are literally carrying the body. Like there's
Yes.
nothing between them
Yes.
and the body except the shroud.
Yes.
I mean, as
Well,
honorable as it is, but is that something that's being adopted here in the States?
I mean, here's what I can tell you. Interestingly, um, Muslims and Jews have never stopped using, natural burial and shrouds. So this practice that seems kind of like fringy and woo woo in some people's minds has in fact continued to go on in the United States uninterrupted in traditional Jewish cemeteries, in traditional Muslim cemeteries, and what you described of the family members carrying that shrouded body to the grave has been going on all along, right? If you're a member of those religious communities,
Right.
that might be all you've ever experienced. We're just trying to move it more into the sphere of people who are not of those faiths. But absolutely, it is that most modern green cemeteries, if the body is shrouded, there actually would be a board of some sort underneath.
Okay.
But I have seen pictures of the Muslim cemeteries and burials where, just as you described, they are carrying that body, and the only thing is that cloth or that fabric.
I
So,
had I had to chuckle a little bit
yeah,
because being Jewish,
okay,
I'm very, and I had
yeah,
buried my uncle last year, and
yeah,
so
mhm,
Jewish. For those that don't know, in Jewish traditions, we do not embalm, and
right,
also in Jewish traditions, we are very quick to bury our dead.
right,
But Jewish cemeteries require vaults.
right,
So we're kind of greenish, but
right.
not so green.
Close, close.
It's like,
Yeah,
if we could just, and
mhm,
also in Jewish tradition, or very religious Jewish tradition, they will bury in a pine box.
correct.
But if you
Yes,
want to be buried in a pine box in a Jewish cemetery, you're still going to be buried in a vault.
yeah,
So it is,
yeah,
but what I know, what Noggle is looking for, and what some of these other cemeteries are offering is, and talk to us more about it. What
sure.
is that ideal? It's literally a green pasture. So walk me through it.
The ideal is that the cemetery itself would be maintained um, in as natural a state as possible.
Like a park, like a
I
natural
mean,
preserve.
actually, we're almost more like a nature preserve.
Right.
A true 100% natural burial ground. There would be almost no indication that it was a cemetery in the ways that you would normally think of one. The ideal is that it's a nature preserve that is as that there's as little disturbance as possible. It might have hiking trails. People may just go there to walk for their own exercise or
Peace of
things like
mind.
that.
Right.
um, Green, I'll get a little technical. Green graves are not as deep as modern graves. We think of 6 feet under as being this, standard. 6 feet under, that depth came into being when the vaults came into being. It has to do with the vaults themselves. So in natural burial, The proper depth is 3 to 4 feet. And I bring that up for a couple reasons. One, because if you go 6 feet under, there's not enough microbial activity for the body to decompose in a reasonable amount of time. The other reason I bring it up is because there is less disturbance to the land, because you are digging a shallower grave. The other thing that's important to mention is that in terms of how many bodies can you bury per acre, in modern cemeteries, they will place as many as 1,200 people on a single acre, because natural burial is trying to be gentler and kinder to the earth, and is trying to again, have cemeteries that look much less like cemeteries. The density per acre might be anywhere from 300 bodies per acre, to 800, and it really depends. So the more natural the cemetery, quite frankly, the less bodies per acre. So that's some of the philosophy behind it. It's really about de-emphasizing our wishes as human beings to have big giant stone markers and monuments saying, I did all these amazing things, here's my right, and really saying, my body is organic material, I am returning it to the earth, which will recycle all this organic material. Yes, use it to feed the wildflowers, the meadow where those bodies are being buried, and you know, let it all return to the earth. Yeah.
And then some of the materials. So the shrouds, what are they usually made of?
Ideally, it would be, organic cotton or linen. You wouldn't want something synthetic in there. It should be something that will biodegrade pretty rapidly, pretty quickly, and be 100% natural.
And then
Yeah.
and then you mentioned the wicker casket.
Right?
So talk to us. That's something
Yeah.
new. I've never seen one before.
There are beautiful, beautiful examples of hand woven wicker caskets, that you can find online. One resource that I highly recommend to folks, is a website that is called Funerary, ARY. It's like funer with airy, Funerary Artisans Collective. And it's a group of United States artisans that have pulled together, created a website. And so, depending on what part of the country you live in, you can find either um, uh, woodworkers who are building, pine boxes that are green burial suited, or weavers who are hand weaving these wicker caskets, usually out of willow, um, and they're absolutely gorgeous. If you can picture like a wicker furniture, right, that has that, it looks like a piece of wicker furniture, except it's in the shape of a casket, and there's usually a lid that pops right on. And yeah, and there are people who are making them here in the US. There are, of course, companies that are also making them overseas and shipping them into the US. I get a little nervous about, labor, who's doing the weaving, how are they getting paid. Uh, So, for folks who really want that kind, I send them to that website in particular, because these are U.S. artisans, and you're supporting someone in their livelihood if
Fair
you buy
market trade.
those. Absolutely,
Can you talk? I mean, do you have pricing that you could share with the audience?
I
Right?
can.
Not so people aren't sticker shock, right? So,
Yeah. So unfortunately, when something is handmade, it's not cheap. So I'll share with you kind of the three price points, with the shroud being the cheapest, the pine box or the wooden casket being the mid-priced, and then the wicker casket. A shroud, and some of those are hand woven as well, but they usually run anywhere from $300 to $500. Um, the pine box will set most people back anywhere, I would say, from 500 to 1,500, or even 2,000 if it's whatever, but 500 to 1,500. And the wicker caskets anywhere from 1,500 to 3,500, just depending. Um, so yeah, there's three different kind of price points,
But
and
still the wicker baskets compared to a very elaborate mahogany, I'm thinking like, what are those high end, um,
yeah. I mean, interestingly, when yeah, 100%.
yeah,
I mean, there are caskets that
caskets
can
are
cost
just,
10,000 or
lined and
and
more
yet I will tell
amazing.
you that working at 2 different funeral homes, the average person doesn't spend more than $3,000 for a casket, and most people spend more like 1,500 to 2,000. The idea that people are still spending thousands and thousands and thousands, it doesn't bear out at our funeral home. Most people realize this is just gonna get put in the ground, so why would you spend $10,000? With rare exceptions. Yeah, most people buy caskets that are what we would consider, I suppose, reasonably priced.
So in the state of Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
human composting does not exist currently, correct?
Not has not been legalized yet. I'm pretty sure that a bill has been introduced. What's going on with that bill? You hear like bills are in committees and things. I'm not following that closely, but I know there are people in the legislature who are trying to introduce a bill to have it legalized.
So
Yeah.
what states is human composting
My
available?
goodness, it is getting legalized so rapidly across the country. We might be up to, I have not looked lately. It's at least 6, maybe 8. I mean, Delaware just legalized it. New Jersey, it's like every time, maybe we're up to 10. It feels like it's spreading very rapidly. Now, that being said, if I may, even though those states are legalizing it, those facilities still have to be built. And so my guess is that's going to take a number of years. That process is done in a facility. So those have to be built. They have to, and so that's going to take time. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about it, right?
Sure.
For those listeners who are not familiar. So we just talked
Sure.
about green burial, which is that
Right.
natural burial, a direct burial, either
Right.
a shroud, a pine box, or a wicker that you go directly into the ground. And now
Right.
we're kind of moving on to, can we say that human composting is green? I mean, or is that
We
something you
can.
okay.
We can, and here's what I will tell you. So everything we know has a carbon footprint, right? We are human beings on this planet. We can't do anything without using carbon. When I talk about someone dying and the funeral home coming to pick up that body to take it back and keep it refrigerated, that was a fossil fuel burning vehicle that went and picked them up, and the funeral home uses electricity
Right.
to refrigerate, right? So human composting definitely has a higher carbon footprint than natural burial. Natural burial is minimal, really, really minimal, especially if you're talking about, if there's a local crafts person who makes your pine box, then maybe that pine box is only coming from 5 miles away or 10 miles away. It's in a perfect world, a natural burial. The number that I have heard, generates maybe 25 pounds of carbon. It might be as little as that. Human composting, because it is done in a building, right? That building is using carbon for
Like a
these
warehouse. I
processes.
mean,
It's
the
right,
the sites I've seen, I mean, I've educated myself on
right,
TikTok, There's
Right,
several influencers out there that are talking
right,
about human composting.
sure,
It's a warehouse. The warehouse has to be kept at a certain temperature. They're bringing
correct.
in, right?
Right, right. And the other aspect of it that is a significant carbon generator. Again, we're still talking about something that's better than cremation, better than burial with, the concrete vault and all of that. When the deceased person is placed on this bed, we'll say, because the human composting is done in a chamber of sorts. So the person is laid on a bed that then is slid into that chamber. They are laying on a bed of organic material. It's wood chips, it's alfalfa, it's other organic matter that is going to help accelerate that decomposition process. So all of those materials, those organic materials, have to be grown somewhere. They have to be harvested somewhere. Then they have to be shipped to that, composting facility. My understanding is that is where a large amount of the carbon for that process comes from. It's in that growing, harvesting, storing, and transporting of those materials. So it is very much a natural process. And the human composting is a very controlled environment where, temperature, air circulation, are all monitored in a way that they can accelerate. I like to say to people, green burial is slow composting. The exact same thing is going to happen, but over a much longer period of time. Human composting is you create the ideal conditions for an accelerated composting process. And so in 4 to 6 weeks, they can return to the family soil that is their loved one's body combined with those other organic materials, and that's that. And they can plant a tree or they can donate that soil to, another project. So it's super cool. I think it would be wonderful if it was legal in all 50 states. It's about giving people options, right? Everybody, I think, should have a right to choose. And I say that even saying, even cremation, even modern burial, I am the last person who's going to tell people they're wrong. That's not the case at all. I would like people to have all the options, so they can decide for themselves what is, do I hope that people will choose natural burial because they're concerned about the carbon in the atmosphere and all of that? Of course. But if somebody really feels like cremation is the method for them, then yeah,
That choice.
God bless.
And
Yeah.
I so expanding, making sure that we're capturing when we say green, right? So
Yeah.
mushroom suits, right? Should we stop there? Okay.
Let's stop right there. So I did a tremendous amount of research on mushroom suits because people kept asking me about them. There was a company that was making them. They are no longer making them. As far as I know, they are not available currently on the market. I'm sure there are people working on prototypes. Um, but the other thing that I think is important to point out is, everything costs money. A mushroom suit is probably another, as you're talking about, the costs, not for less than $1,000, probably 1,500, 2,000.
And where do you put the body while it's decomposing, right?
Well, I mean, it would be in the ground. I think the mushroom suit was created as something that would contribute to like a natural burial. Like you
So
can
you
be
would put
wrapped
the mushroom suit on and then a shroud
and
and
then a shroud or then in the box and then go in the ground. And quite frankly, like the decomposition process is going to happen with or without a mushroom suit,
okay.
right?
The idea is to making meaningful, right? The idea is,
Yeah,
I if I'm doing a pre-planning, if I'm thinking
yeah,
about the decisions I want to make today, so my family doesn't
right.
have to make them when the
Yep,
time comes.
yep,
These are things to consider. So I
right.
just want to kind of circle back. We've talked a lot
Sure.
about the natural, but
Yeah,
because this is death and dying in the digital age, I do want to
yeah,
kind of add that spin to what
sure.
technology
Yeah,
within the green burials might be used. So
yeah,
GPS locators, QR
yeah,
codes, where do you
yeah,
see technology might be added within the green burial,
absolutely.
natural burial? Go ahead.
Some green cemeteries are large enough that they will provide a GPS coordinate to the family to help them find that grave site in the future. Even if it has a marker, if it's a 50-acre cemetery, the family might just, this way they can use that GPS coordinate to always go right back to the spot. In terms of QR codes, I know that regular cemeteries are beginning to put QR codes on headstones. And I would not be surprised if natural cemeteries are not already, some of them, doing the same thing. Again, if there isn't a traditional marker, maybe there would be a place in the cemetery where people who are buried there, you could scan the QR code and it would take you to that person's obituary, and you'd be able to learn something about that person by virtue of the QR code. There is a place, certainly social media, as you have said, is a phenomenal place to learn more about this. All the green burial education organizations, the Green Burial Council and the Conservation Burial Alliance, and these amazing organizations all are on social media, all have websites.
Well, maybe what we'll do is the websites that you just mentioned, we'll add that to our resource section in order to highlight our conversation here. And just to close out our conversation, Karen, tips and tricks, lessons learned. If this
Mm,
is something I want to, as a consumer, want to
yeah,
explore more on,
yeah.
um, what are some things red flags, right? Like you said, the
Mm,
mushroom suits, those could be a red flag. So what are some other
yeah,
red flags or lessons learned I should be aware of?
it's a great question. I would say that if anyone is interested in this and calls a funeral home just to say, like, hey, I've heard of this. Is this something you can help me with? Red flags would be a funeral home that tells you it's not legal, um, that you can't do that, but we can bury you in the local cemetery and we'll turn the vault upside down.
Oh, talk
Some
about that.
Yeah, some funeral homes will promote that they do a green kind of burial. By turning the vault upside down, basically what they're telling people is, we'll take your casket and we'll put it directly into the soil so that the
Okay.
casket is in contact. They'll turn the vault upside down so that they're still able to prevent the ground from sinking. The body is in contact with the soil, so it will, and they'll say, that's green, like, we'll just turn the vault upside down,
And
major
charge
red.
you a premium for that too.
Oh, 100%. They're right. So, yeah,
Interesting.
those, right, telling you it's not legal, that you can't do that, we'll just turn the vault upside down. Those are all red flags. Hang up and call another funeral home.
So
Yeah,
buyer beware, right? When they say we do green, ask them to walk you through what their
right.
green process is.
Right. I mean, the other thing is there are green friendly embalming fluids. And sometimes a family may want to have a public viewing of their loved one for any number of reasons. Green cemeteries typically will allow certain products, certain non-toxic products, to be used as a kind of embalming. Um, but that is also not required. So I would say another red flag would be a funeral home saying, oh, yeah, we can help you and we'll do the embalming with, essential oils and yada, yada. If you don't want embalming, again, it's not required. So, yes, buyer beware.
Buyer beware, and being an advocate. I
Yes.
Again, I can't emphasize enough to have these conversations while you are of sound mind, to be able to think of your future,
Yeah.
knowing it's good to have a plan.
Yeah.
My final playbook, that is the importance of understanding the legal, financial, physical, which is what we're talking about today, and digital
Yes.
aspects of the life that you've built. Carin, thank you so much.
You're
Your
welcome. Thank
expertise is
you.
wonderful, and I know I want to have you back because we want to talk about obituaries and writing one's
Okay.
obituary. So, with that,
Sounds good.
thank you so much and appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.